let me know if I need to raise my voice at all. My name's Jomon. I currently live at Great Vow Zen Monastery, and I've been practicing with the Zen community of Oregon for 20 years or so. And it's always a pleasure to come to Sangha Jewel and be with all of you. I have some questions. I am curious about if anybody knows or has heard about what a bodhisattva is. Go ahead and raise your hand if that's maybe a little bit okay. And who are some other bodhisattvas besides Jizo? Some bodhisattvas you know and love. Just shout them out. Manjushri.
Samantabhadra.
Samantabhadra. They're over on the table here on their elephant and lion. Avalokiteshvara, also known as Kanzeon or Kuan Yin. And so of those three, and with Jizo Bodhisattva, they represent the four elements. Samantabhadra, who has a sword, represents the element of air. Manjushri represents the element of air. Samantabhadra represents the element of fire, great activity Bodhisattva. Avalokiteshvara, and these are the Sanskrit names. They are also Chinese and Japanese names. Avalokiteshvara or Kanzeon or Kuan Yin, she represents water, and Kishitagarbha, Dizang, or Jizo represents earth. And they all have different qualities and kind of different realms that they're available to take care of. So this is in no way going to be a comprehensive look. There's so much, and in fact, so much of this has come from Jan Cho Zenbei's, Mushin's teacher, one of her teachers and one of my teachers, who wrote the book on Jizo Bodhisattva. And this is a really pretty comprehensive book about Jizo. So a lot of what I'm going to share with you is based on that. And really the fact that Jizo has made a great pilgrimage along with Buddhism from India to China to Japan, and now here we are practicing with Jizo in many ways here in the United States. So Jizo's origins are actually found in India in the earth goddess Prithvi, or Prithvi. She is often depicted either seated on a lotus or carrying a lotus. She has these vessels which are representative of the earth. I'm not sure why she's on a turtle. Maybe that has something to do with her, some of the Vedic and Hindu symbology of the time. Prithvi, the goddess of the earth. And it was in India where Buddhism began. Another earth goddess that is related to Prithvi is named Bhumi. Here again, you'll see the very similarities. Standing on a lotus, sitting on the great earth itself and holding the lotus flowers, forearms. And Bhumi, the word is a Sanskrit word for earth. And when Buddhism started being adopted in India, it merged with the pre-existing cosmology. And one of the ways it did that was in the Buddha's enlightenment story, which is my favorite story when we do in December, the Buddha's awakening, Rahatsu. I never tire of that story of how the Buddha awakened, all the different steps, which included a time at which he was being really challenged by Mara, the tempter, or the demon one, with Mara's armies threatening him and Mara's daughters trying to tempt him with desire. And finally, after he was able to just deal with all of those challenges, Mara challenged him with his own self-doubt. And we ourselves experience these things on the cushion every day, whether we're tempted to, get up and check our email, or sitting here stewing about something in anger, or just doubting ourselves, like, I can't do this. This isn't for me. These are the same things we all run into when we're seated in meditation. And so when Mara challenged him and said, well, who are you to say that you're the enlightened one? Who do you think you are? And the Buddha reached down and touched the earth with one hand and said, I call upon the earth as my witness. And in that moment, the earth goddess, there was an earthquake, and the earth goddess came up from the earth and indeed witnessed that his many lifetimes of being a bodhisattva, someone who could, who is essentially enlightened, who could merge with the mystery, but chooses not to. They hang back to help others. The earth had witnessed all of this, and she emerges from the earth, and in some of the stories, she twists her hair, and the water that comes out of her hair forms a great river and dispatches all of Mara's armies, washes them away. And so this pose is called the Bhumi Sparsha Mudra, the touching earth mudra. So you'll see Buddha statues in this pose quite commonly. And it is a reference to this origin, this original relationship with the earth goddess of India, Prithvi or Bhumi Devi, or Vasudhana is another name for her. So I also want to bring forward another Vedic or Indian deity, Yama, the Hindu lord of death and justice. We will see him later in some other forms as these original ways of understanding life and death get carried along to various other countries, other cultures, and get adapted by them. Okay, so here is Kshitigarbha. That is the name of this particular earth bodhisattva. The Sanskrit word Kshitigarbha means earth store or earth womb. Everything that is born from the earth is the realm of Jizo Bodhisattva. So that's a lot of things. And we'll go through and learn all of the many ways that Jizo is of, that Kshitigarbha is of benefit to all beings. Kshitigarbha is often depicted with this staff, a shakujo, and a sintamani jewel, a wish-fulfilling jewel, or a jewel that lights the way. This is a bodhisattva who, unlike the other bodhisattvas, are often depicted as kind of like royalty or have very fancy vestments. This bodhisattva is often depicted as a simple monk or a pilgrim. That's a very important aspect of this particular bodhisattva, someone who's a pilgrim, walking from place to place, very simple. So the shakujo, you might be able to see, has 6 rings on it that jingle, and that is so that as he's walking, or as she is walking, can be either gender or no gender, the jingling will warn animals and other beings to disperse, so that there's not any misunderstandings on the path, accidentally harming another animal or creature. And the jewel is a wish-fulfilling jewel, a light. It can also be a light to others along the way and in the darkest places. And we'll see all the dark places that Kshitigarbha goes to be of aid to other beings. So Kishitigarbha starts in India and then goes to China, and with that is named Dizang. Now, in India, Kishitigarbha wasn't actually all that popular. Kishitigarbha is pictured often along with a bunch of other bodhisattvas. Didn't really get adopted in the same way that they did in China, and certainly not in Japan. So that's important to note, that as Buddhism traveled to these places, Kishitigarbha, Dizang, Jizo, the importance of this bodhisattva grew, and people were able to adopt this bodhisattva to serve their needs in many, many different ways. So as the Silk Road opened and travelers were all along the Silk Road, this particular bodhisattva became the guardian of travelers and the guardian of pilgrims and the guardian of people who were vulnerable out there. They needed a protector. And Kishitigarbha was able to offer people that sense. He's sometimes started being depicted in a shawl or a blanket, and the travelers would sort of adopt this being in that way. And so I want to share something about how when Buddhism moved from India to China, that the outlook changed to this a different kind of an ideal for what a Buddhist practitioner could be. We then began to have this bodhisattva ideal. So in Chosen's book, she says of Jizo, he was born in India in the 1st or 2nd century, about 600 years after the Buddha died. His name in Sanskrit was Kishitigarbha. He came to life within a family of bodhisattvas as the Mahayana school emerged from the original teaching of the Buddha and the elder monks. In the Mahayana school, the ideal practitioner was a bodhisattva who sought not only personal enlightenment, but the welfare and spiritual liberation of all beings. So that's a big change in Buddhism. It's a broadening of the whole purpose and the entire capacity that we're practicing, not just for ourselves, but for all beings. This is a representation of Jizo right here, and we'll learn a little more about who these other folks are and what this is about, that he's kind of holding court, and you'll see what that is. So there are 3 texts that mention Kishitigarbha that were in China, found that they were written in between the 7th and 9th centuries, and some people say that they were originally translated from original writings from the Buddha's time, but some people say they were written then, that there hasn't been any evidence that they existed in Sanskrit before. Nevertheless, these are notable texts. The original vows of Kishitigarbha Bodhisattva Sutra, the Sutra of 10 Kings, and this is where Dizang intercedes with the Lords of Death. The Lords of Death are the 10 basically judges that gauge where you're going to go after you die. Heaven, hell, somewhere else. And Dizang serves to mitigate the sentences of the deceased. He's like a defense attorney, basically, before you might end up in a hell realm or something like that. And then this is a text from 8th century China. Mulian saves his mother, and that his mother was ate a lot of meat, apparently, and ended up in a hell realm. And so her son goes to try to intercede for her in the hell realms and successfully does so. And so this is another way that Jizo became a petitioner for people in the hell realms. Now I'm going to share some about this. In fact, let me read you a little bit about this. We can maybe, I don't know, I grew up generic Protestant Christian and was told about heaven and hell, and I was taught it pretty literally, and it was really scary to me as a child. And so I think that some of these teachings may have been promulgated for the same reasons, to get people to behave themselves. But we do not have to take them up in that literal way. These are historical ways that Buddhism was expressed, and ways that the people who were practicing in their various places and times understood life and death. But we can take these stories into a more figurative or archetypal way. They can be useful to us in an archetypal way, and I'll share a little bit about that too, how we practice with these kinds of teachings. But if you have that sort of Christian history or some other kind of history about hell realms or things, like I do share that with you. So this Mulian saving his mother was written in the 8th century. It's the story of a disciple of the Buddha named Mulian, or Moggallana, who searches for his deceased parents, trying to discover their fate. He finds his father in heaven. His mother, however, had acquired an unhealthy appetite for meat. For this, she was reborn in hell, where he finds her nailed down, and there's some violent things there. The Buddha releases her, and she is born in a slightly higher realm as a hungry ghost with a huge belly, needle-thin neck, and skin hanging off her bones. Mulian tries to send his mother food through offering it on the altar, but it becomes flaming coals as it enters her mouth. He appeals to the Buddha for help. The Buddha tells the sorrowing son to provide a feast for the monks on the 15th day of the 7th month, at the time they emerge from the summer retreat, 3 months of intensive and ascetic practice. As he does so, through his offering, his mother is freed. As the story ends, she ascends into heaven. So that is kind of setting a tone and saying that our activities can benefit people who have gone on before us, who have died before us, that our activities now can be of benefit to them. So I want to show you some of these images about the realms of the dead, and some of those, some of the way that Jizo kind of got into the cosmology because of this heaven and hell thing. So prior to being sent to various courts, there's a whole series of courts that someone who's deceased has to the 10 kings they have to face. But the first part is this mirror platform, and they basically watch their life pass before them, and any of the unskillful things they did, they have to look at and account for. And here's King Yama. Do you remember him? He was blue in India, but here he is, the Lord of Death, presiding over this process of judgment. And so here's a much larger version of the same picture with some detail of the mirror, trying to scare people into good behavior. I don't know how well that's ever worked, but it's pretty scary, all this stuff. So here's one, Chosen likes to recall this one. This is to scare people away from adultery. Adulterers are condemned to, they see their beloved, it's like clear as day, it's their beloved, and so they reach out to embrace them. It's actually a flaming post. So they're burned, and they are condemned to do that over and over again. Pretty horrible. Kind of your typical hell things, But here's Jizo helping someone out. This is, again, a very important job that he took on as someone who was rescuing people from all these horrible realms, and someone that people could appeal to, someone that people could and treat to be helpful to them. And that, well, I'll talk about how we can practice with that. So this purgatory type place, this DU, the realm of the dead, people would be doing a trial with a different one of these 10 kings every week. So that's 7 weeks, 7 of them. That's where we get our 49 days of chanting someone's name on the merit list. It is every time we chant someone's name, every time we dedicate our practice to the people on the merit list, we're helping like tip the balance. Maybe they won't have such a terrible rebirth if we can basically say, can we help them out in this way? And then there's another judge that they go in front of the first year of their death and then the 3rd year. So you kind of have to keep going, you know, don't forget that person. You want to keep chanting for them. And so we as survivors can offer the merit of our practice to that person, but also Dizang can intercede on their behalf. And here he is doing that, a little more of a close-up or a different picture of that. And there's his shakujo, and it looks like he's really presiding over them in this way. So there are these kind of 2 really different depictions of Jizo, the Lord or the King, this powerful presence, you know, with a crown and opulence, like the other bodhisattvas. That's sometimes we see a little more of that in images of Jizo from China and particularly Tibet. But Japan really took on the humble monk, no frills, super simple pilgrim kind of vibe. And the archetype of Jizo really adapted to the needs of the place and the needs of the people and the time that he was brought there in the practice. So here we are with Jizo in Japan. And look how cute these Jizos are. So Jizo became extremely cute in Japan. The word for that in Japanese is kawaii. And you would say, kawaii ne? Cute, isn't it? Kawaii ne? So Buddhism, when it traveled anywhere, was first adopted by the aristocracy. And in Japan, actually, some of the first adopters of Jizo Bodhisattva were the samurai, were the warrior class. And there were stories of a warrior Jizo that would go onto the battlefields and kind of pick up all the dead arrows and give them back to the people on the battlefield. Totally adaptable. But Jizo ended up really being a favorite of women, and in that process, Jizo's characteristics became more feminine and even more childlike. Jizo was adapted for the concerns of women, for not just interceding in matters of life and death and hell realms, but for successful conception, for a healthy pregnancy, for healthy childbirth and nursing and childhood diseases. There's different Jizos for all these different concerns and needs. And Jizo's like right in there, just totally the availability for all of these things was right there. Farmers and peasants, of course, here's the Jizo, protector of all that is born from the earth. There's a Jizo for eye diseases. There's a Jizo for aches and pains. So Jizo became a general practitioner in Japan. Really available for just about anything. So it's important to keep in mind, again, here is another sort of cosmological teaching that you just don't have to take literally. You can take it archetypally. Is the Jizo being the guardian and the protector and the helper for all the beings in the 6 realms of existence. The 6 realms of existence. So in front of, there's one way to think about life after death, or this in between time, is that you might end up in one of 6 realms. And you'll find in Japan, how many people have traveled to Japan? A couple, 1 or 2, okay. That usually in a cemetery in Japan, you'll see these 6 Jizos at a time. And those, when there are 6 of them, they're called Jizo Roku, number 6. And they represent a Jizo who's taking care of all these different realms of existence. So there's the super heavenly realms, which is all the stuff you would imagine that would be in a heavenly realm. All the best food, all the best smells, no children under like 7. I'm serious, like that's in a list, like they never had have a gray hair or a wrinkle for a long, long time, for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. And they have no discomfort ever. Well, in all these realms, they are still subject to impermanence. Even though it lasts thousands of years as heavenly realm, eventually the beings in the devas in the heavenly realms, one day will see a gray hair. One day we'll see a little face wrinkle, and that freaks them out because they know their time in Deva heaven is coming to a close. They're going to tumble down out of the heavens. But boy, is it nice while they're there. And it's so nice that they don't have to practice at all. They don't have to meditate. Why would you? Why would you sit and do a sesshin when everything is totally beautiful all the time? So we can imagine that the people that we see who seem to have everything, you know, or maybe the times when things are going really well for us, we're like, you know, this meditation thing, I'm good with it. We may not have the same fire for practice if we're not ourselves in a time that's kind of hard or suffering. So we might actually know a little bit about what this is like in these moments that things are all well and good. Why practice? But the next level down is Asura heaven, and Asuras are jealous gods. And they're always fighting to get into Deva heaven. They always are trying to go to war with the Devas in Deva heaven. They're warlike, they're angry, they're jealous of the Devas. And I kind of picture them kind of like the people who we can see nowadays in our celebrity culture or political culture. You know, people who are downright miserable or angry, but very, very powerful. And so that's what it's like to be in Ashura heaven, is just to always be kind of wanting there to be, get more, do more. Sense of deserving, sense of entitlement. But that too comes to an end eventually. I'll skip over the human realm for now. The animal realm, the animals that we see, they don't have the same relationship that we as humans do with cause and effect. They live by instinct, may not have a sense of the big picture. Now, I'm as big a dog lover as anybody, so I could probably argue with myself about some of this. I've had some dogs that I think saw the big picture. But the way that animals are often treated, you know, that they're exploited or just, have to live outside in the wild and eat or be eaten. It's that kind of realm that we can sometimes find ourselves in too. You know, if we're in a particular exploitive work situation, maybe, when it's like, is my life nothing but waking up, going to work, getting exhausted, coming home and going to bed and doing it all again? That's the animal realm. And many of us have been there. Maybe we are sometimes there more than we'd like to. The hungry ghost realm is, and we saw some references to that. They are beings that are starving, and so their bellies are swollen, but they have tiny little pencil-thin necks, so they can't get food down, and any kind of food or water that does touch their lips actually burns, so they can't find nourishment. But the wanting is very intense, the craving, the hunger is very intense. And we can sometimes think about this in terms of our own experiences of addiction, where we just cannot be satisfied. And we try to fill that emptiness, that hole with whatever it is, whatever, and we all have our thing, whether it's social media or substances or behaviors. We've all touched the hungry ghost realm ourselves. And finally, the hell realms, which we saw plenty of there too. We can think of that in terms of war or violence. It may be that we're not perhaps in those kinds of realms at this very moment, but we may have experienced them at one point. So it is said that the human realm is uniquely favorable for Buddhist practice, because we have just enough comfort and just enough discomfort. We have quite this range above and below that it makes us need to practice. It makes us sometimes even want to practice. And that practice is available, and it is a balm often for our lives. And so the gift of being born in the human realm fits into this the 6 realms of existence in that way. So I'll give you a little more on the hungry ghosts. Here's a interesting example of Jizo offering solace, offering sustenance, and really offering the Dharma to the hungry ghost, that's the kind of true food that really satisfies all beings and can offer relief from this particular kind of suffering. And here he is again feeding the ghosts. So the hungry ghosts are called gaki, and sagaki is feeding the hungry ghosts. That's a particular ritual or celebration that happens. Now it's often called sajiki, which means offering food. And at the monastery, we do a version of this in which we populate this sajiki altar with all of the things, whatever your things are. We all get to contribute our particular things. So I've just got a little close up here. You can see here's a computer. We might be a little bit of addicted to being online, or exercise or bodybuilding. Here's an A+. I know a little bit about perfectionism too. Some food, coffee, fancy cars, junk food. This one was mine. It's the Golden Retriever Instagram I was just telling you about. I might spend a little too much time on Golden Retriever Instagram. Wine, beer, there's diet soda, Oreos, condoms, sugar. It's all here. It's all
knitting.
Knitting. Someone, that's pretty wholesome addiction. If you gotta feed the, maybe there may be a hungry ghost that's like, I can't, that's all I want to do. Maybe. Yeah. So these are ways we can offer ourselves some grace, and it's if we can't do it for ourselves, we can at least kind of even imagine that someone else could do this, that Jizo could offer us some grace for our own hungry ghost capacity, our own jealous God capacity. Like Jizo could totally be there for us. And as far as the hell realms, the fire pits, Jizo is also the guardian of firefighters too, because of that. Just FYI. Okay, so there are many, many forms of Jizo, especially in Japan. I have to sneeze. Excuse me. And these really allow us to see just how powerfully Jizo was taken up in Japanese Buddhist practice. So this is a representation of Jizo from 1228. It's a long time ago. And there are more than one of these hadaka or nude Jizos. And they either have, most of them have very nondescript genitalia that speaks to the fluidity of the gender of Jizo. Can be female, can be male, doesn't have to be any gender at all. And so how interesting that is one of the qualities of Jizo, that Jizo is not limited by any particular gender at all, or can inhabit whatever form that's needed to be of service to all beings. I'll read a little bit, I think. Yes. The other thing about this is, here, I want to read about so the monks in this, that take care of this particular Jizo at this particular temple, every single year they sew a whole new set of robes for this Jizo. And it's a big ceremony when they change the clothing of this Jizo. And so that's some of what's in the other photos there. Let's see. So this is a Jizo at a temple called Denkoji. When the nude Jizo at Denkoji Jizo was taken apart for restoration in 1950, the curators were surprised to find it was hollow. In a cavity in the thigh, they found a Kannon Bodhisattva holding a monk's staff in the left hand and a lotus in the right. Inside the head of the Jizo was a small blue glass vessel of 5th century Chinese origin that contained a diminutive sandalwood statue of the healing or medicine Buddha, and 3 tiny fragments believed to be relics of the historical Buddha. Very valuable. The Denkoji Jizo likely was fashioned in 1228 under a joint commission by 3 women. The torso of the Jizo was filled with scrolls of Buddhist sutras. 2 women, one a nun of 83 years, had written dedications in classical Chinese, offering the merit of the statue for the salvation of their parents. A 3rd woman, also a nun, included prayers to Jizo Bodhisattva, asking to be reborn as a man. Which in some of the early Buddhist rules, the many hundreds of Buddhist rules, that is one of the, there was a belief that many people believe was post-Buddha, that women could not be enlightened, that you had to be reborn as a man. There's a lot of misinformation. Oh, it looks like I need to plug in my computer pretty soon.
In the office.
Yes, the red thing.
Yeah.
It should be right on the floor there. Thank you. I will add that the founder of our sect, Soto Zen Buddhism, Dogen Zenji, from the 1200s, wrote a whole essay about how women are just as capable of enlightenment as men, and in fact was really just laughing at anybody who believed otherwise. It's really, he's just like dunking on the people who believed otherwise, that women could not be enlightened. So I want to make sure you are aware that these kind of reliquaries of the culture at the time, we don't have to carry them with us in our practice. And we can find that out from our direct experience. You know, that our own, we don't need Dogen even to tell us these things. We can see them for ourselves, that women can practice just as well as men. Want to reach?
Oh.
So here's another way that Jizo intercedes for people. This is a particular kind of Jizo in Japan, a shibare Jizo, rope-tied Jizo. And I'm going to read you, I think I may or may not have this story here. the story goes that there was a soldier who was being chased by this army, and he found a temple and hid there, and he saw a priest there, and the priest helped him, put him in the robes, and gave him a chant book and some beads, and he just started pretending to be a priest. And so the people who were after him got the priest and tied him up and took him away. And so he's there with the rope, but then the next day, that priest was gone, the guy they thought was the one that they were chasing. And they searched all over for him and found the Jizo statue was tied up with the same ropes that the soldiers had tied up that priest with. So it's an example too of Jizo who substitutes themselves for someone else, Migawari Jizo. And there are many, many stories of Jizo stepping in to go through some difficulty or do some work for someone else, including another nude Jizo story. I'll read you one of those. It's kind of sweet. Okay, so in the 1200s, there was a official named Hojo Tokiyori, and his consort were devout worshippers of Jizo. One day, as this couple played at a dice game similar to backgammon, they decided that the loser would have to disrobe. The consort lost the match, but she was ashamed to undress and prayed to an image of Jizo to rescue her. Suddenly, the little Jizo statue disappeared, reappearing as a naked woman standing on the game board. This image was enshrined in Kamakura at Emyoji, the Temple of Long Life. It was dressed in robes sewn of cloth and stood on a backgammon board instead of a lotus petal. When pilgrims came, the image was sometimes taken out of its robes to reveal that this Jizo had female genitalia. Because it substituted its own body to protect the modesty of the consort, it is called a Migawari, or substitute or surrogate Jizo. And it was also a naked Jizo too. There's another lovely story of intercession of an older couple, very poor, who would make straw hats to make a living. And it was a very cold winter night, New Year's Eve, and they had just finished making 5 hats. And the old woman sent out the old man into the weather to sell these 5 hats so that they could get some food. And, you know, be careful, it's really snowing hard out there. And so on the way, he passed a set of Jizo Roku. And as it's snowing on their heads, he felt so bad for them that they must be cold. So he put all 5 hats on their heads. And then there's one left without a hat, so he put his own hat on that particular Jizo. And then he comes back, and his wife is like, "What are you doing? We don't have any food, and you gave away our hats." But then, as they were sleeping, they heard some commotion outside their door. And the next morning, they opened the door to see heaps of rice cakes and food on their doorstep, and little footprints that lead all the way back to those Jizos. One of my favorite stories. So here's Chosen years ago in Japan, and this is an example of the bibs that are sewn to clothe the Jizos. That is something that the Japanese often do. They put little hats on the Jizos or put little bibs on the Jizos. And this has to do with some of the legends of Jizo helping children who have died, which we'll talk about a little bit. But Jizos are everywhere in Japan, absolutely everywhere. So over here on the top right is just some random section of sidewalk that has a bunch of Jizo statues, and people will just take care of them and put bibs on them, and you can just walk by them and usually the people in the neighborhood take care of them, clean them, put fresh flowers, or little kids on their way to school offer them a juice box or something. Like, it's just, they're very living and adored parts of the country. Often they are at crossroads too. Jizo is the guardian of people at a crossroads. If you have a difficult choice, or if you're in discernment about something, this is another way to kind of enlarge our sense of our situation. And Chosen said she just saw this in somebody's garage, just like on a box, this little whatever it is that they drew a Jizo on, and because it had that basic shape. Why not? Here's another example of people just relating to this basic shape as a Jizo. This is one of the usually two guardians of the Dharma that you'll see often at the pre-gate of a temple or shrine. These, buff guys, and they're there guarding the Dharma. These little shapes at the bottom there were really just a fence. They weren't meant to be Jizos at all, but darn it, they sure do look like Jizo. Let's put a cape, let's put a hat, let's go ahead and make these Jizos too. And so they are. Here's another example of just a little, somebody just built this along the sidewalk on the curb, and they tend to it and offer them water or sake or flowers or whatever, and they're just kept by neighborhood people. So Jizo has long been the guardian of travelers and people at the crossroads. But with these bibs and hats, these are derived really from another function, another very important function of Jizo Bodhisattva, the guardian of children, women, children, and children who have died. And this story is pretty important. The inheritance of filial piety, the responsibility of children to their parents, both in India, in China, and Japan, very much a part of the morality of these countries. And so how do we align this energy of Jizo with that existing cultural value? And so, child mortality in many of these countries and many of these times was extremely high, that children would not live very long. And so here's a child that didn't get to grow up to then take care of their parents. It was seen as almost something that they, were falling from their responsibility to do. And the parents would worry about the children. So it's said that these children would have to stack rocks along the river Sai in order to honor their parents, and that every day there would be a demon that would come and wreck their little statues, but that Jizo would come and protect them from the demon and carry them in his robes and shelter them in his robes. There is some reference to these sort of hell realm, sort of almost a judgment thing where they remove your clothing and hang them on a tree, and the weight of them has to do with, again, where you'll go subsequently. So that's why the children are naked, but that, Jizo kind of protects them with their robe. And then this is another really important aspect of Jizo practice in modern Japan, the Mizuko Jizo. Mizuko. And Mizu means water. So these are, Mizuko Jizos are water baby Jizos. So babies who weren't able to be born alive, so unborn fetuses, babies who were just born, or children 1 or 2 years old, are kind of considered these water babies. And really, we all have, all humans start out floating in water, the amniotic fluid, and Japan being a island in the ocean, everybody's really just floating in the ocean. So this very natural sense of humans in relationship to water, that humans can sort of blossom into these little water baby formations, but then be absorbed back into the water. Also, in post-war Japan, post-World War II, birth control was not allowed, and abortion was very, very common. In fact, oral contraceptives were legalized in Japan, I don't even want you to guess, in 1999. Oral contraceptives legalized in Japan, 1999. So there were a lot of babies that in a country that was just brought to the ground with World War II, abortion was extremely common. Families could not take care of their children, and so the grief and weight of all of those experiences would weigh on the families, the women that went through these experiences. And so the Mizuko Jizo ceremony was developed to help really acknowledge these losses. And this is a Mizuko Jizo. Again, this isn't an ancient representation of Jizo. It started in around the 1960s. Oh, and so one of the reasons why we have red bibs and red hats for Jizo is that in some aspects of Jizo, he has two attendants, Shozen and Shoaku. And, you know, the master of all that is good, or the master of all that is evil, or sickness, or death. And so the red and white clothing symbolizes these two attendants. And red became the color to dispel illness and death. So people would dress children, and people would dress, sick people in red. And so that's how red became this, like, oh, I can help someone. So here are some beautiful Mizuko Jizo shrines. Each one of these has been, donated by a family, and then other ceremonially, other families or individuals can come in and offer flowers. Often little pinwheels are offered as a moving memorial to a child who may have died. This is a video. You can see some of these. This goes on, and the sound of these little pinwheels is just so beautiful. I believe this is somewhere in Kyoto. And here are some of the other ways that people dress the Jizos, not just in red, but all different kinds of ways that they take care of the Jizos. And then at Great Vow Zen Monastery, we also have a Jizo garden where we offer the Mizuko Jizo ceremony and also a general Jizo ceremony to honor not just children who have died, but anyone who has died, usually around Memorial Day. So anyone can come and participate in that ceremony, and it usually entails quietly sewing a little garment, a hat or a bib or something to then place on one of the Jizos in the garden and allow it to be weathered with our grief and remembrance. And so I want to leave you with a little bit about the qualities of Jizo. And again, like, these are we can think about this in sort of the literal way that Jizo is somewhere out there and we're separate. But just like the earth, we aren't at all separate from any of this. And we in fact have all of the same capacities for awakening as anyone else. And we can cultivate those capacities. We can cultivate these qualities of Jizo. And so this is chosen from 2003 or 4, probably 2003, 2 or 3. Right when they started the monastery, they were doing a Jesus for Peace project. Chosen wanted to, she herself, her birthday, her actual birthday was actual Nagasaki Day, August 9th, 1945. Is it 45 or 44? I can't remember. I think it's 44 when the bombing was. Anyway, so she's always felt a deep affinity for Japan for that reason, and is probably not, is probably related to the fact that she became a Zen priest in the Japanese tradition. And so she, for the 60th anniversary of Nagasaki, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, wanted to offer the people of Japan something, and she thought she would take, she was making ceramic Jizos and other representation of Jizo, and so she thought, well, I'll bring 60 representations of Jizo to Japan. And Kaz Tanahashi, who is a Japanese American who is, a translator of Dogen and a Zen practitioner. He's a Renaissance man. He's a peace activist. He is a calligrapher, a master calligrapher, and many other things. He challenged Chosen that your vow is not big enough, bringing 60 Jizos to Japan. You need to make a much bigger vow, one that you can't do by yourself, one that you need help for. So they figured out how many people actually died in the bombing. So something like 250,000 Japanese were killed in the atomic bombs. And so she said, I will bring 250,000 Jizo images to Japan. And boy, you need help with that. So she started this call out to the world to please submit these pieces of cloth, basically making quilts. There were stamp kits that got sent out to all corners of the world, and people would stamp images of Jizo, color them, very creative, and they were sewn together, and each person would write at the bottom their name, their age, where they were from, and how many Jizos were on their square so that they could count them all. And I think they well exceeded the amount. So the qualities of Jizo are benevolence, great determination, optimism, fearlessness, and great vows. And this is a picture at Great Vow Zen Monastery of great teacher Mushin. And this is a place at the monastery called the Shrine of Vows. And Jizo is the guiding bodhisattva of Great Vow Zen Monastery. Chosen has long had an affinity with Jizo as the guardian of children because of her own work as a pediatrician. She's currently retired, but much of her career was spent being an expert in the field of child abuse. And so there's some aspects of this book that describe that. So that's just, consider that a trigger warning in this book a little bit. Some of her work is discussed in there. But that she was so burdened in many ways by all of the things she had witnessed and seen and worked with, that when she learned about the Jizo ceremony, the Mizuko Jizo ceremony, and participated in it, it healed her in so many ways. She realized she needed to offer it to anybody, to everybody. And so she does. That's a huge part of her offering as a Zen teacher, and a huge part of the offering of Great Vow Zen Monastery, which includes this Jizo garden with many, 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 many Jizo statues and images that people can then offer their memory to. But we ourselves can take up these qualities of benevolence, which is just this, kind of friendliness, really. What if we showed up in the world with just a basic friendliness to others? Maybe you know somebody like that who's just kind of a gregarious or friendly person, and just how kind of nice that is, how comforting that is, how beneficial that is in the world. What if we were more like that? What if we could be just a little more of that? That might be really helpful. or even just offering a smile to someone on the street, how valuable that can be when someone might be at a really low point. That basic friendliness, or even just the generosity of giving someone the benefit of the doubt. If you've ever been offered that kind of grace, where we assume the best of each other, boy, that goes a long way, doesn't it? Yeah, that's the kind of benevolence that Jizo is famous for. I mean, he goes into, the Asura realms. I don't know if I'd want to do that, So this basic friendliness, availability to all beings. And to do that, you need great determination. You need to be able to just stick with it, because all of the obstacles that will arise, we may have a great aspiration, and the moment we do, all the obstacles will arise to meet it. And how are we gonna work with that? How are we gonna get through that? We need determination and just that insistence that this is what we're doing. Jizo also is, that's one of Jizo's qualities. And optimism too. This is, I think, highly underrated. Certainly in my family culture, maybe our American culture, there is almost kind of a fascination with cynicism and the assumption that everything sucks and is just always going to, or that there's it makes us somehow sound more intelligent if we think that everything's going to hell, and at least we'll be right if it does happen. There's that kind of hedging that makes us a little bit hesitant, perhaps, to really just come forward with a sense of optimism about the world, about ourselves, about other people. But Jizo, that's one of Jizo's qualities, and we can practice with that. How do we cultivate a sense of optimism that even in the most difficult things that happen, can this be of benefit somehow? And maybe in your life you've had that experience where something you thought was the worst thing that could possibly happen, and it actually turned out to be a blessing. I've certainly had that experience. So that can kind of train us into that possibility, or begin to become willing to see things a little bit differently. Fearlessness is another quality of Jizo, and I don't think that's about not feeling fear. I don't think that is what it is at all. Although sometimes maybe it is. So I think fearlessness or courage is about feeling the fear and maybe doing the thing anyway, when we know it's something that is of benefit, or we know that it's something that's important. I just had a dream last night about my friend's 4-year-old, there was some dangerous situation, and I was just running to protect her, and I did not have a single thought about any risk to myself whatsoever. That's the kind of fearlessness of a bodhisattva and of Jizo bodhisattva. So one of my favorite topics actually is people who do actually go into burning buildings, or rescue someone who's drowning, or interrupt a shooting or something. They're just walking on the sidewalk, and they see the situation and they act, and they rescue somebody, and the news person, after it's over, puts the microphone in their face and says, you're a hero. What do you have to say to everybody? And they say, I'm not a hero. Anybody would have done this. Anybody would have, right? That's what they all say. There's no sense of self in this at all. It's just who we really are. It's who we really are. And so that's the kind of fearlessness that is available to each of us. And finally, vow. That we make a vow, we aspire to a particular way of being. How do we want to be? Not necessarily a goal, what do I want to do, or what do I want to be, but how do I want to be? And when we find ourselves to be clear about that, and boy, this practice really helps us clarify our minds to really see how do we want to be. We can see our habits, and hopefully we're hold them with patience and grace, and we can just alter our course a little bit towards a different way of being, towards our aspiration. And even if we just switch by a couple of degrees, make a small change, our life will end up at a completely different place. And that is the way of a vow. It's our North Star. And nobody ever expects to actually reach the North Star itself, but we can orient with it. We can get vaguely north, and that will put us in a completely different place if we're aligning with these qualities, or aligning with the precepts, or we're aligning with some way that we've realized we want our life to be, or how we want to be in our life. That is the practice of vow. And so to close, I will just share this quote from Chosen, which I think it's not super clear in the sort of historical presentation. It really seems like Jizo is out there someplace else, not me. But truly, we seek to learn about Jizo Bodhisattva and kind of get to know the energies of this being, this archetype, in order to become Jizo, in order to be Jizo ourselves. And so I hope to, in some of the talks, introduce some of the Jizos that are walking around among us right now, and really show how when human beings take up these qualities, or take up these vows to be of service, to be of use, to be friendly and caring, that the capacity for this is extremely powerful, extremely beneficial to the world, extremely important. So that is introduction to Jizo. Thank you for your time and attention. I think we're near, maybe we could do a walking meditation or a sitting meditation or something. I'd like to, we could do, we're almost at a Kinhin moment. Where's our Shuso?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll get to sit in meditation a little bit after that, and just let this soak in. No need to try to